Welcome, loved ones. An untruth may go halfway across the world while the truth is still fastening its shoes. But, eventually, the truth emerges barefoot and wins the race. Welcome back, the chosen one. Today, we're not here to whisper. We're here to expose. The topic regarding you is no longer debatable. It's a full mental breakdown for those who made you the villain in a story you didn't write. However, most people are ignorant of this little fact. Psychologists think that people often criticize those who expose their deepest weaknesses without even trying. So guess what? You didn't try to shake the table. You sat at it, and your legs trembled. For years, you have been the focal point of everyone else's discussion. The moniker that caused group chats to explode, family dinners to become awkward, and coworkers to mutter like high school kids in cubicles. They obsessed and argued. They analyzed. However, there is a plot twist that they did not expect. You were never a problem. You were merely the fact that no one wanted to face. Walked into the room, and now there are the bystanders who applauded your fate and distributed popcorn. They're fatigued. I'm not tired of the drama. Oh no. They're tired of protecting people who can't even recount their stories accurately. And let us be honest. Some individuals have spent so long trying to make you the villain that they have forgotten what the original lie was. At this point, their tale has been altered more than a bitter ex's Instagram post, yet it still lacks believability. So prepare yourself, for in this video, we'll explain why the tables are turning, why even your adversaries are tired, and why walking has done more damage to lying than any argument could. Get ready. This isn't retribution. This is a revelation, and everyone is watching things unfold as if it were a Netflix special in which they had no clue you appeared. Let me begin. Number 1, they did not protect you. They were defending an untruth. They built around you. They weren't protecting you. They were defending the fantasy they had made around you. That's the bit nobody wants to admit. They were arguing about you at the dinner table in secret group discussions. It was not because they didn't know who you were. They already knew. What they really sought to protect was a false story. They all agreed on a version of events that painted you as the problem because it made them feel more secure in their jobs. Admitting you were never the problem would have prompted everyone to reflect on themselves. It would have meant admitting they jumped on the bandwagon without considering where it was going, that they ignored warning flags. Repeated gossipers stayed silent when they might have spoken up. It would have forced them to admit that they believed lies because they were more comfortable than the truth. And comfort is a powerful drug. When people discover that the story about you does not line up, they do not rush to correct it. First, they panic because they are faced with the guilt of playing along, the embarrassment of being wrong, and the horror of what else they have been lying to themselves about. That is the exact breakdown. This is why people are tired. Not because of you, but because their own deceit has finally caught up to them. You did not need to prove them wrong. Life has done it for you. Consistency, calm, and growth. These are things that cannot be fabricated. People are starting to notice it. They're learning that the problem wasn't the person they were examining. The problem was that they had to dissect you in the first place. People are finally sitting in the uncomfortable quiet of truth as their illusions crumble. Not because they've suddenly improved, but because they've had enough of living a lie that never belonged to them. And it shows. Number 2, actual drama never involved you. People were fighting with their own reflection through you. The conflicts over you were never really about you. You were just the surface-level excuse. What was really going on was far deeper and more personal. People weren't battling you. They were fighting themselves, and you served as an outlet. You triggered something in them, not because you were unpleasant or loud, but because you looked to be something they couldn't comprehend. Authentic, calm, and grounded, difficult to manipulate. That energy has an impact on people who have spent their whole lives pretending you reminded them of everything they never dealt with, including their concerns, jealousy, and the parts of themselves they avoid seeing in the mirror. And instead of confronting the harsh reality, they put everything on you. You become the villain in a story unconnected to your actual conduct. It is easier to point fingers than to think. It's easier to blame yourself than to admit they've been wearing a mask for so long that they can't recognize themselves. Without it, you will become their projection screen. They flung all of their emotional baggage upon you and then blamed you for the weight. It wasn't fair, but it was convenient. That explains why people were so loud about you. Not because they knew you, but because they saw themselves in you. And it scared them. Your article exacerbated their chaos. Your confidence highlighted their self-doubt. Your presence caused their masquerade to break apart, and they detested you for it. However, the room has suddenly become quieter. People are weary. Drama, gossip, and emotional gymnastics. It's all coming together because you never wanted to be the center of their identity crisis. You've just walked in truth. The reality was a mirror. Not everyone liked what they saw. They are finally getting it. You were not the one to ignite the fire. You were the flashlight. The arguments were not about what you did. They were discussing what you disclosed. The smoke instantly dissipated. People are tired of blaming the mirror for their reflection. Number 3, they weaponized their weaknesses and used you as a target. They did not target you because you were damaging. They came for you because you were not concerned. You were steady. In a world that relies on reflexes, when insecure people can't figure you out, they get ugly. They begin throwing doubt, twisting your comments, exaggerating your flaws, or making things up entirely. Because if they can't control you, they will try to shape how others see you. That is how they deal with the underlying unease that they are unable to acknowledge. You became their target because they needed somewhere to unload everything they couldn't handle on their own. Jealousy, bitterness, and secret regret about not being as bold, disciplined, or grounded as you. Instead of addressing the problem, they militarized it. They were agitated by your calm demeanor. Your progress made them feel stuck. Your strength made them feel vulnerable. They made you the problem. They fabricated a story about you. And I preferred the truth, which was loud, dramatic, and constant. They needed you to reply. They wanted a breakdown, a snap, a mistake, anything to demonstrate you were like them. But you didn't give it to them. That's what made them even furious. You kept rising up with your head held high. You kept choosing peace. And each time you didn't fight back, they looked even worse since others saw the turmoil didn't start with you. It was always aimed at you. Now tiredness is setting in. They are tired of talking about you since nothing sticks. The lies are unraveling. The narrative is collapsing, and the public is watching. They are starting to question why somebody would go to such lengths to bring down someone who isn't even fighting back. You did not ask for the battle, but you were ready for it by refusing to succumb rather than matching their intensity. And now, without your feedback, their game is dying. Number 4, your presence disrupted their hierarchy. You made individuals who had previously held positions of authority feel invisible. You did not just walk into the room. They sensed you, and that is when the stress started. Not because you did anything unlawful, but because you violated the unwritten rules that keep sensitive egos at peace. You didn't kiss up. You didn't compete. You didn't beg for a seat at the table. You could have made it better yourself. And that alone disrupted the whole foundation. They expected to feel prominent. You were not loud, yet your presence made a sound. The kind of loudness that shows folks who only feel powerful when someone else is under them. These people built their reputations by becoming the go-to source for insight, leadership, and celebrity. But then you moved forward, not wanting to steal the spotlight, but rather shining in your own path. And they suddenly felt like background noise in a setting where they were used to being the main voice. That's why you were labeled tough, haughty, or antisocial. It was never about your attitude. It was about your autonomy. You weren't playing the game, which made you difficult to manage. They wanted you to shrink so that they could feel taller again. They wanted you to apologize for being whole. But you didn't. You simply kept being yourself, openly. Then there came the genuine threat. People are just now starting to recognize this. They're seeing how people with titles, status, or authority acted like children when they couldn't box you in. They saw how hard they fought to drag you down when you weren't even trying to rise above them. Your strength exposed their fears. Your article disrupted their power trip. You did not violate any rules. You demolished the idea that they were ever in charge of anything important. People are wondering who is really tough, since the individual who never sought power has always had it, and those who need control to feel appreciated. They're being acknowledged for who they really are. Shaken, not strong. Number 5. You sparked their unresolved past, and they tried to make you suffer for someone else's transgression. You did not damage them. You reminded them of anguish they'd never experienced. That is what triggered them. You entered regions with the energy of someone who has done the inner work, faced their darkness, accepted their truth, and did not use their sorrow as a weapon. People who have buried their grief rather than confronting it find such self-assurance unsettling. They saw in you what they were afraid of becoming. Instead of being driven by it, they turned their rage on you. Suddenly, you were too intense, too much, and too different. But you were nothing but a mirror and mirrors. Don't lie. You didn't even have to say much. Your simple presence exposed what they had spent years trying to conceal, their rage. They never accepted their desertion. They never mentioned the deceit. They never recovered from it. They looked at you and saw ghosts from their own past. And, without realizing it, they punished you for someone else's mistake. This explains why you had such a big reaction. Your actions did not justify the hate you felt. The conversation didn't match your passion since it was never about you in the first place. You were merely a substitute for their misery, a live reminder of what they were running from. Instead of withdrawing, they went for the safest target they could find, you. However, the fog is dissipating. The people around them are starting to see the holes in the story. They understand that you did not initiate the drama. You just unintentionally pulled the curtain back. And the underlying message was not enticing. It was decades of suppressed emotion, unresolved pain, and sadness in search of a scapegoat. You weren't the villain. You were the one to make the revelation. And now the room is catching up to reality. You didn't create the wound. You made it difficult for them to deny it was bleeding. Number 6. You are not a threat. You are proof that they settled. You weren't intimidating. You were simply, unapologetically living. And for people who have given up on themselves, that kind of energy is unappealing. You did not risk their position. You compromised their comfort. You were living proof that settling is not survival, but self-betrayal. They didn't want to be reminded of it. Instead of taking responsibility for their acts, they accused you of being too ambitious, passionate, or unusual. But the truth is, you were just too honest for a society that has come to romanticize being secure. They watched you move with vision, speak with purpose, and enter places as if you belonged, even when nobody offered you a seat. That level of risk-taking is enticing, but it may be disturbing for people who have traded excitement for predictability. Every time you wanted to grow, you stepped out of your comfort zone. Every time you denied a version of life that did not reflect your worth, you reminded them of a dream they had quietly buried but never had the courage to resuscitate. They mocked it. They criticized it. They called you too much because they had never realized that too much is exactly what people need when the world urges them to shrink. However, the issue was never with your driving. It mirrored their own resignation. They settled for less. You showed them. They did not need to. People are tired of pretending. The issue is your ambition, honesty, and presence. They're starting to see the problem isn't that you're a threat. You are a mirror. A warning that life does not reward being little, and that comfort zones will ultimately fade. You did not disrupt their tranquility. You disclosed their compromise. And it's getting more impossible to ignore, as your life demonstrates that settling is a choice, not a destiny. People are finally asking why they stopped reaching when you never did. Number 7. You were the emotional dump site until people got sick of the odor. You were not the problem. You acted as a conduit for everyone else's emotional distress. They provided a secure environment for you to express your dysfunction, guilt, envy, and projection. They did it with ease since you were strong enough to carry it without breaking. However, just because you could carry it does not mean you get to retain it. You gradually became a scapegoat. not because you failed, but because your presence helped others avoid dealing with their own problems. They realized exactly what they were doing. You were convenient. You were the one who could handle it. You were the one who did not stoop, fight dirty, or blow up. So they piled on all the miscommunications. Your duty, every group tension, your energy, your awkward silence. You must have done something. But in truth, what they blamed on you was just emotional baggage. They lacked the maturity to sort through. You were the emotional landfill for a dysfunctional group dynamic, and they kept dumping, expecting no one would notice. However, poison does not stay buried. It evolves. It starts smelling bad. And now, the same people who kept silent as you were carried are taking a step back and noticing something stinks. And it is not you. Because when you ultimately left, the mess remained. In fact, it became louder. The arguments continued, and the tone remained consistent. The item never came. That's when people started to connect the dots. The common denominator was not your presence. It was their behavior. They thought eliminating you would solve all of their issues. But now that you've left, the dysfunction is clear. Even the blind are starting to smell the truth. They're realizing you weren't the reason. You were the captivity. Nobody wanted to deal with what you'd taken on. And now that you're no longer here to carry it, the weight is becoming apparent. The stink is terrible, and the truth permeates every reason they've ever offered themselves. Number 8. You risked the system from which they benefited, so they labeled you a problem in order to maintain control. Every dysfunctional system has a one goal: survival. Not healing, not the truth. Quietness is essential for survival. Obedience and unchangeable responsibilities. The peacekeeper maintains silence. The black sheep takes responsibility. Whatever happens, the golden child will be protected. The individual who questions any of it immediately names the problem. That was you. You didn't play along. You make inquiries. You increased awareness. You moved honestly, when manipulative conduct was normal. That was risky in a system built on unsaid agreements and concealed resentments. Because such systems are unafraid of turbulence. They trust it as long as it is controlled. They are afraid of being transparent, honest, and accountable. You carried all three. You did not threaten anybody. You compromised the whole system, including group dynamics, family scripts, and workplace politics. That's why they attacked you so fiercely. It wasn't personal. It was systemic. They needed to isolate you, change your image, and convince everyone that your presence was the source of the disruption. Because if people started listening to you, the whole structure would collapse. They were well aware of this. They did not want anything to change. They asked you to stop watching, speaking, and reflecting their dysfunction back to them. You got too aggressive, impassioned, or controversial just by asserting that what they said did not exist. You were not threatening anybody. You refused to normalize dysfunction, and in systems built on silence, even honesty seems confrontational. However, the illusion is starting to unravel. People are starting to look closer. People who played along have noted that nothing has changed after you left. They have become worse. The drama that they said you were disrupting was a performance, and without you, the script is falling apart. True manipulators are exposed. The real problem is not with people who criticize the system. They're the ones who kept it broken while claiming everything was normal. You weren't the issue. You were the change, and the system couldn't handle it. Number 9. People understood that they had gotten mentally exhausted from striving to perpetuate lies about you. For years, individuals spent more time maintaining a false story about you than addressing their own truths. It was not all about the fights and drama. They had to do constant mental acrobatics to keep the illusion going. Every discussion about you included distorting facts, erasing reality, and creating stories to make them feel justified. It became boring, like walking on a too-fast treadmill, never getting anywhere but completely exhausted. They kept rewriting the script, aligning themselves with everyone who might help depict you as the villain. They kept to the story whether the pals were poisoned or dishonest. However, behind the surface, this unwavering effort chips away at their component. The energy necessary to sustain that deception drained their spirit, clouded their judgment, and damaged their sense of reality. Now, as time passes, the weight of those lies catches up with them. The mental strain, emotional toll, and spiritual deprivation cannot be hidden any longer. They realize that they have been at war for years, not with you, but with their inability to face truth. The truth is that you were never the problem. They just needed someone to blame so they wouldn't have to look themselves. The irony is that by striving to bring you down, they broke themselves. Mental tiredness is a subtle acknowledgement that the tale was built on sand. The fallacies that previously gave them a false sense of control, and now there are shackles keeping them back. And when they begin to acknowledge their exhaustion, they understand that all of their efforts have been wasted on a struggle they never needed to fight. They are burned out not because of you, but because they refuse to be honest with themselves. And that realization is the first step toward obtaining the freedom they never believed possible. One that does not include dragging you through the mud in order to feel better about their own reflection. Number 10. You disrupted the emotional economy by giving without expecting to return. You joined a world where emotions were the currency. Every relationship had a fee, and every smile came with constraints. People traded favors, validation, and dedication like stocks, constantly considering what they owed and what they might get in return. But you played a different game. You contributed without expectation, extended compassion, did not keep score, and arrived without permission or proof of merit, which disturbed everyone. They loathed you not for being naive, but because you were not transactional. You did not ask for freebies, honors, or recognition. You didn't hustle for status or strive for a share of the emotional pie. You just gave your time, energy, and attention because it is who you are, and you did not expect anything in return. And in a society preoccupied with financial statements and favors owed, such generosity seemed to be a risk. Power game addicts thrive on having control. They turn everything into a trade-off so that they may decide who gets what and when. However, you reversed the tendency. You disrupted their emotional economy by transforming into a spiritual-willed donor, a rare species that gives freely from true abundance rather than duty, revealing the emotional dealers for what they were: transactional, hungry, and insecure. Everyone is starting to see who is really wealthy and who is just playing a game. Your sweet charity shines like a spotlight on the greed and calculation lurking under the surface. It's why they tried to undercut you, calling you extravagant or unrealistic, since your presence strengthened their authority. Players seem little and empty. You're not here to play games or get IOUs. You're here to give, inspire, and remind everyone that true strength comes in plenty. It is difficult to imagine riches that enable you to offer without needing to take. They built a circus around you because they couldn't match your stillness. You kept calm while others lost their senses. You did not shout, argue, or compete for attention. Your quietness was not a weakness. It was a refusal to participate in the performance. But this made them desperate. They couldn't cope with the fact that you weren't reacting as anticipated. So they built a circus around you, throwing shadow, spreading rumors, and creating conflict in order to startle you out of your coma. They assumed that if they made enough noise, told enough stories, and focused the spotlight on you, you'd crack. But you didn't. You stood solid and unshaken. The chaos belonged to them, not to you. You were the calm in the middle of their manufactured storm. That stillness made the circus seem ridiculous by exposing how superficial their actions were. People are starting to see it clearly. They've had enough of being the audience in a show where you were cast as the villain for no apparent reason. They acknowledged that the drama was never yours to own. You did not add gasoline to the flames. They lit it themselves. And your refusal to dance to their tune exposed the whole farce. The performers pretended that you were a part of the show. They are losing followers as more people know the truth. You were never the source of the chaos. You were the silence. They were unable to dispel the presence. They lacked control. That's silent. It is the most audible message of all. A number. Your candor made their performances seem to be dishonest. You have never put up a show. You never felt obligated to seem to have everything under control. Alternatively, wear a mask to blend in. Your honesty was something you couldn't turn on or off. It just existed. That kind of honesty is disturbing for individuals who spend their time crafting personas, rehearsing lines, and manipulating perceptions. Your genuine character revealed their actions for what they were: empty, shallow, and desperate. When you are the most genuine person in the room, people are compelled to confront their own deceptions. Rather than recognizing their inauthenticity, they opted to attack you. They blame people who do not participate in the game because it is easier than addressing their own fear of being exposed. So they fabricate tales, spread rumors, and try to depict you as the problem. However, they are really keeping their painstakingly constructed stage persona, which they want everyone to believe today. People around them are starting to see through the ruse. They're tired of witnessing the same old performances, phony smiles, and meaningless platitudes. They want something honest and uncensored. And your authenticity shows through in that sea of pretense. You are both loved and reviled because you represent a truth that others do not want to face. The irony of being oneself is striking. You've discovered the biggest lie in the room, not about yourself, but about others. And when the curtain falls on their performance, a growing number of people opt to speak up for what is real, not the act. Your genuineness is not your exclusive strength. The truth is shaking the whole stage. A number. Their proof against you is usually gossip wrapped in a good suit. The proof they gave was not evidence. It was rumor wearing a suit and tie. It seemed authoritative, sounded trustworthy, and carried the weight of judgment. But it was all just stories shared about, assumptions converted into accusations, and emotions weaponized to paint you as the perpetrator. None of it was based on facts or reality. It was veiled emotional manipulation designed to dominate the narrative and keep everyone in check. People totally embraced it, repeating the tales without question since it was easier than determining the reality. They did not intend to contradict the version offered to them. It was simple to believe the drama, choose a side, and join the chorus of blame. However, that convenience has now become a source of sadness. Those who held on to that proof are coming to see how hollow it all was. They recognized that the assertions were never founded on facts. They depended on fear, uncertainty, and the need to protect fragile egos. They were emotionally compelled to dislike you, pressured to believe a story that made sense to their own discomfort rather than addressing the reality. Now that the smoke has lifted, those who believe the lies are exposed and embarrassed. They were pawns in a game they didn't fully understand, manipulated by those looking to maintain power via division and deceit. The rumor they believed did not only injure you. It challenged their own beliefs about what is authentic and what is not. The truth is suddenly shining through. The evidence was never really proof. It worked as both a mask of insecurity and a weapon of control. And those who were fooled are recognizing that they did more than just lose sight of you. They lost sight of themselves. A number. You didn't lose. You revealed the rotten core, which was never yours to bear. You didn't lose. No matter how hard they tried to convince you otherwise, the chaos swirling around you was not your fault. It was the festering rot under the surface, the decay. They worked hard to be discreet. You did not cause it. You revealed it like a crack in a wall that no one wanted to see. Your presence made the disguised fractures harder to ignore. And this concerned them, because once the rot is visible, it can no longer be overlooked or disguised. You become a mirror, reflecting their ugliness. The dots light up, indicating their existence. And for a long time, they tried everything to silence you, push you away, and make you the problem. Convince everyone that you were the source of the problem. But you stayed faithful. You did not accept their degradation. You portrayed it like it was. That demanded strength. It also damaged the basis of their power. People are now tired. Not because of you, but because they've seen others damage themselves and tried to dim your light. They're done with the games, the blame, and the manipulation. The exhaustion comes from observing a truth that has been suppressed for far too long, as well as the pain caused by continuing the lie. However, exhaustion may also suggest an awakening. The spell that kept everyone in denial is crumbling. The real is growing. People are beginning to see the distinction between those who speak the truth and those who hide behind illusions. Your light, once a thread, is now a beacon, and the world can't help but notice when the truth breaks through the clamor. You didn't lose. You revealed the rotted core. Now there is hope for healing. The weight you were never meant to carry is melting away. Freedom is only ahead in a society that desperately clings to illusions. You have been the unwavering truth that cannot be silenced. The chaos, the claims, the nonstop drama, they never represented your worth or character. They were indications of a larger issue, a weakened system fighting to protect its fragile foundation. But here's something remarkable. You didn't break. You remained steady in the face of their projections and desperate attempts to change your story. Instead, you were the mirror that shattered the carefully manufactured facades. People are now waking up. They now understand that the fights were not about you. They were about preserving comfort zones built on fear, control, and denial. Your presence called into question everything. You encouraged them to face uncomfortable realities that they had previously disregarded. And, although it may have been lonely at times, you were never left to fight alone. Exhaustion, confusion, and outrage. They were community wounds exposed by your daring to just be, and what you've accomplished is nothing short of extraordinary. You've disrupted detrimental habits and highlighted faults in the structures that others depend on for support. You revealed the emotional load that was unfairly placed on your shoulders and proved what it meant to give freely without expecting anything in return. You represented honesty in a culture drowning in performance, and you remained calm while others created storms. The tide is suddenly shifting, and the full story is surfacing. Your story is now being recognized. Those who previously regarded you as the problem are now confronted with their own reflections. The exhaustion of supporting life is giving way to a sense of reality. And, through it all, your light shines brighter. You are not the problem. You symbolize the awakening. When the enchantment breaks and the reality emerges, your journey becomes a model for others seeking to step into their own power. So stay steadfast, knowing that what you've gone through is never a failure, but rather a huge success that opens the door to freedom, healing, and a future in which truth cannot be ignored. The world may have tried to dim you, but you were meant to shine. If this message spoke to you, don't let it stop here. Click the subscribe button and join the movement of truth seekers and real people rising above the noise, such as this video, to show that you're done playing small. Please share your story or suggestions in the comments box below. Let us build a culture where honesty is vital. Share this with someone else who needs to hear it. Together, we're breaking the cycle, exposing lies, and shining brighter than ever. Your voice matters, so make it heard.